Hello and welcome back to this interesting story of how a married woman couldn't let go of her ex and he cheated on her husband multiple times with her ex till she became pregnant for her ex. Adanna was a beautiful young woman from Lagos, Nigeria. She came from a loving family and had been raised with strong values around commitment, honesty and faithfulness in marriage. When Adanna was 22 years old, she met Emeka at a friend's party. Emeka was charming, confident and successful. He swept Adanna off her feet with his attention and romantic gestures. However, Adanna was already in love with another man called Obinna. Obinna was her first love that broke her virginity and showed her true love, but due to the fact that Obinna is still struggling financially, Adanna accepted Emeka not because of love but because Emeka was already made, even though she has no love or feelings for him. Within 6 months of dating, Emeka had proposed and Adanna had accepted joyfully. Their families celebrated their union with a huge traditional Nigerian wedding. The first few years of Adanna and Emeka's marriage were blissful. Emeka provided well for them as the owner of a thriving import-export business. Adanna was a devoted wife, keeping an immaculate home and preparing delicious Nigerian dishes for her husband. They welcomed their first child, a son named Chika, 2 years into their marriage. However, as the years went by, cracks began to show in their seemingly perfect marriage. Emeka worked extremely long hours to keep up with the demands of his business. He was often away on work trips, leaving Adanna to care for Chika alone for weeks at a time. The distance and lack of quality time together began to take its toll. Around this time, Adanna reconnected with an old boyfriend from university named Obinna. They had dated seriously before Adanna met Emeka. Obinna had been utterly heartbroken when Adanna left him for another man. When they ran into each other at a shopping mall 5 years into Adanna's marriage, the old feelings suddenly resurged. Obinna was recently divorced and found himself still deeply attracted to Adanna's beauty, warmth and kindness. He made it clear he still had feelings for her. Adanna knew it was wrong, but she could not deny the excitement she felt at Obinna's attention. Her marriage to Emeka had grown stale and she felt terribly lonely most of the time. Adanna and Obinna began meeting up secretly for lunch dates, telling little white lies to cover for themselves. Their meetups soon became more frequent and more intimate as the emotional connection became a physical one as well. Before long, they were engaged in a full-blown affair. The guilt ate away at Adanna, but every time Emeka left on another work trip, she gave in to temptation and slipped into Obinna's arms. After a year of carrying on the affair, Adanna realized she was pregnant, and there was no way the child could be Emeka's based on his travel schedule. Adanna was scared to tell Obinna the truth about her pregnancy for fear he would insist she choose between him and her husband. So she kept up appearances with Emeka, passing off the pregnancy as his child. 9 months later, she gave birth to a daughter and named her Chioma. Emeka was overjoyed to have a second child and assumed Chioma was his biological daughter without question. Meanwhile, Adanna continued sneaking around with Obinna, telling him a web of lies about using birth control and waiting for the right time to leave her husband. 2 years after Chioma's birth, Adanna got pregnant again, this time by Obinna as well. She told Emeka she was struggling with fertility issues from breastfeeding and other postpartum effects, which was why they had not been able to conceive again until now. Emeka believed her deception and celebrated when Adanna gave birth to another daughter, Kamilu. By this point, Adanna was in a constant state of misery, racked with guilt and feeling unworthy of her husband's love and trust. When Kamilu was 6 months old, she fell ill and was rushed to the hospital, and it was diagnosed that she will be needing a blood transfusion from her father Obinna to save her life. Adanna's heart crumbled as she knew Kamilu was not Emeka's biological daughter. She did everything to stop the blood transmission, but the husband Emeka insisted his blood must be used. On the day of the blood test, it was discovered that Emeka's DNA is different and doesn't match with Kamilu's. Adanna finally broke down and confessed everything to Emeka. She admitted to her multi-year affair with Obinna and revealed that Chioma and Kamilu were not his biological daughters, but Obinna's. Emeka felt as though his entire world had shattered. The rage, shame and betrayal he felt knew no bounds. He demanded Adanna leave the house immediately and cut off all her access to their finances and assets. Newly unemployed and destitute, Adanna took Chioma and Kamilu and moved into a low-income housing complex. She reached out to Obinna, thinking he would want to be with the mother of his children and support them now that the truth was out. But Obinna wanted nothing to do with the responsibilities and burden of fatherhood and 2 unplanned kids. Adanna's parents were appalled by her behavior and refused to take her in or help support her in any way. They saw her actions as an unforgivable violation of their family's values. Her siblings also shunned her out of loyalty to their parents. So there Adanna was, a well-educated woman in her early 30s from an upstanding family, now a broke single mother of 2 young daughters fathered by her ex-boyfriend during an affair. Her husband had divorced her and got full custody of Chika. No one in her life was speaking to her. She had completely destroyed her comfortable middle-class existence through a series of horrible, selfish decisions. For several years, Adanna struggled terribly as a single mom in poverty, working low-wage jobs with unstable hours and no benefits. She scraped by on welfare and child support payments from the court-ordered agreement with Emeka. Chioma and Kamilu grew up sharing a tiny room in their apartment, sleeping on a dilapidated pull-out sofa bed. There were many nights when Adanna could not afford to put food on the table for them. When Chioma was 10 years old, she began asking tougher questions about why her father was not around and why they lived in such poor conditions when her older brother Chika seemed to want for nothing. Adanna could no longer carry on the lies and deception. She finally had to tell Chioma and Kamilu the horrible truth about how they were conceived and the affair that had destroyed their family. The 2 young girls were utterly devastated and felt a deep shame over the circumstances of their births. They struggled with anger toward Adanna and a sadness over not really knowing their biological father and being rejected by him. As Chioma and Kamilu got older, they continued to resent their mother for the life of hardship, poverty and family fracture she had inflicted upon them through her infidelity and dishonesty. At holiday time, they saw their friends spending time with their loving extended families while they struggled as a fragmented trio of lost souls. When Chioma was 18 and Kamilu was 16, they decided to track down the biological father Obinna. Neither Adanna nor Emeka knew about this. Chioma and Kamilu desperately wanted to connect with that side of their paternity and seek answers. However, the reunion did not go as they had hoped. Obinna had moved on and started a new family after his divorce, a wife and 3 other kids to whom he was a devoted father. When the daughters he never wanted showed up on his doorstep, Obinna rejected them outright and refused to engage, devastated by the interruption to his new life. Chioma and Kamilu were crushed by this second paternal rejection. They realized they were truly alone in this world as newly adult women, discarded as mistakes and cast aside by every biological parent. The sisters decided to lean on each other and focus on building their own lives apart from the dysfunction of their family origins. They worked hard to put themselves through university, staying strong and determined. Chioma eventually became a successful corporate attorney, while Kamilu pursued a career as an engineer. They lived together in a nice flat, creating the stable, loving home they never had as children. Though they both had opportunities for marriage and children of their own, Chioma and Kamilu decided to forego those paths after witnessing how Adanna's infidelity and lies ravaged their family. The trauma of their upbringing made them afraid to ever put innocent children through what they had experienced. Once per year on their birthdays, Chioma and Kamilu allowed Adanna to take them out for a meal. But they kept her at arm's length, unable to forgive the choices that corrupted their childhoods and left them deeply scarred. Adanna lived with profound regret and shame until the end of her life, mourning her role in breaking apart their family. This is the sad story of how one woman's affair and doubly duplicitous births brought utter ruination and trauma from which her offspring never fully recovered. It is a sobering example of how destructive, selfish and deceitful actions by parents can have catastrophic consequences that echo for generations to come.